Well, if you mean by that interacting with examples of deluded minds, there's a temptation, I think, among many people to think they have to fix other people. And yet you can't do that. What you have to realize, and this goes back to these very old teachings from the Vedas. What you have to realize is that every person is some reflection of the divine. Now, within its huge spectrum of energy, there are some very low frequencies. And there are those who do, or let's say who are only able to reflect those frequencies. What the purpose of a spiritual path is to raise the awareness so one can reflect a higher vibration of the divine. Now, to some extent, until one achieves enlightenment, there is some delusion going on in the mind. You know, the idea of acquiring is nothing but delusion. But you see, so is self-doubt. So is unworthiness. These are all levels of delusion. And so when you're working with yourself, which is really the only mind you can work with, what you want to do is train your focus on the divine, however you do that. Train your focus on the divine. Now, it's very difficult because, you know, one of the things that religions do is they offer you images of some aspect of the divine. And that's a good place to start. It brings your focus away from the more mundane things in life. So as Swami was said, one of the things that I teach people is with images of your teacher are very important because you connect with that form body that is captured in the image. And so that form body becomes like a door for you to access the truth body, or some say the wisdom body. Because that, you see, the form body, we drop when we leave physical form. And yet that package of energy is still available for our students to touch into, but it's in a more, well, it's not in a physical manifestation. Although sometimes when I appear to people, they do kind of see a physical manifestation. It's not hardcore flesh. I can't do that anymore because I would sort of explode it. But I can take an energetic form that approximates a physical body. I don't do that very much, but I do sometimes. You see, when I am needed to go to my students, I use that as a vehicle. But right now, I need you to come to me. So you might start with an image of me, where you try to merge with that image. Or then you have an image inside your mind, where you try to merge with that image. Now, it's not just merging for the sake of merging. You know, the egos get very upset about this because they think if you merge with me, they're going to lose control in your life. And of course, we hope so. We hope so. It's your ego that acquires, not your soul. And so when I'm working with humanity, I operate from the soul level. I borrow a body, yes. And, you know, from time to time, we have to work on that body to keep the energy vibrations plane to plane compatible. So know this, as long as one has not fully realized their enlightenment, there will be delusions present. That's the nature of what you're cutting through. You need to know that, not to judge them or to judge yourself or anybody else for their apparent delusions. You use them to discover where you have not yet fully aligned, you see. And so, can you go free of self-doubt without stepping into arrogance? Some cannot. In fact, some don't even know self-doubt because they have so much arrogance. That's delusion, you see. Even a sense of, I don't know, I'm not a good enough student. That's delusion if you really believe it. Now, there's another place where you use humility. One should be humble, not only in relation to the teacher, but to the divine, to the cosmos, for goodness sakes. It loves you. But you have to approach it with humility. How foolish to think you could be arrogant in the face of the cosmos when your lifetime is very short by its standard, you see? So arrogance is very foolish, it's deluded. So you look within to see where does some part of my ego slip into arrogance? Or where does it slip into unworthiness? And frankly, I don't see one of these as better or worse than the other. They're just delusions. When you say, some people come and they say, well, Master, I'm so confused. First thing I say, don't say that. What you're saying is that the divine is confused, and this is categorically a lie. So don't feed your mind with those kinds of notions. So what you do is you work on the delusions that you have. And it's very tricky because, see, one of the characteristics of delusion is most people don't know they have it. For them, it seems real, you know? And some of you have heard me talk about, I use this all the time because it's such a wonderful example for what humans do. And this goes way back to the 70s. And on the campus of Berkely in California, it's always been kind of a liberal school, but a wonderful school because they were one of the schools that explored work with using psychedelics. And of course, it all got out of hand and confused and crazy and all of that. And a lot of negative stuff came out of it. But there were those who, you see, using a psychedelic in the right way really opens the mind. I don't recommend anybody just do this on their own because it won't be done. Your ego will be in charge, you see. But when you set the stage for a spiritual experience and then you use something like psilocybin, you have the possibility of opening to seeing the divine being there. The sad thing is it doesn't last. You then have to stabilize that way of seeing. But there were a couple of fellows running around on Berkely, and they were in a psilocybin experimental thing. And they both, but they were at the same time, they had this amazing experience where they saw the divine. And they saw that it was in them. Now that's true. That's true. That was an accurate vision. But they lost that way of seeing, of course. And so they went out on the Berkely campus and started announcing to everybody that they were God, as if everybody else wasn't. So you see, this is delusion. And even once one sees correctly what is, one can still slip into delusion. So you have to watch the mind at all times. And you come back to wanting to love others into their highest self. That's maybe the highest thing you can do that is utterly free of delusion. But if you think that when someone whom you have sought to love into their highest self, if he or she becomes enlightened, be very careful. The ego might want to take credit for that. I love them so well, look what happened. Delusion. So it's in a way, it's kind of tightrope. But what delusion does not have is compassion and wisdom. And as long as you set your sights on these, you're headed in the right direction. Does that mean you will never experience delusion? No, it doesn't. You may have a moment of self-doubt. And from time to time, it's good to back up and look at the consequences of one's actions or one's speech. But be very careful about slipping into anything. This is why it is so important to find a way to keep your mind on the divine. Now, most people can't do that 24/7, but that is the goal. You want to have your mind on the divine even when you're sleeping. Some of you may remember, we haven't worked with this. I do want to do maybe an online workshop where we just work with the syllable Om. And we practice it over and over until you can experience those different levels of awareness that are represented in that sound. It's a very powerful sound. And yet many people use it to go to sleep, don't they? Amazing. I hope that's helpful. Delusion is a very broad topic to address, but keep your mind focused on the divine. Watch for arrogance, watch for unworthiness. And if it tips to either side, you're into delusion. And I hope that's helpful.